Blueberry Morning is one of my favorite cereals, but so is Crispix. So what I like to do is put some dried blueberries in my Crispix, and then you have the perfect cereal. I've got some coffee in my chip mug. I've been making some good progress in Dark Force Rising. This is the second in the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. So it takes place after the original trilogy, after Endor. In fact, at one point in this book, Leia revisits Endor, or at least is in orbit above Endor, and she's saying that history books will one day say that, on Endor, that was when the Empire ended, but here 5 years later they're still in the middle of the mopping up and they're not sure that they'll succeed. There are all sorts of political arguments between the former rebels, and there is an Imperial remnant led by Grand Admiral Thrawn. So he was actually kind of out in the outer edges of the galaxy during the actual war between the rebels and the Empire. The rebels thought they had all the Grand Admirals accounted for, but they didn't know about Thrawn. So he is the mastermind behind all of these attacks that the Imperial remnants have been mounting on the New Republic. So yes, we get to see Luke exploring his Jedi powers, Leia also exploring her Jedi powers a little bit, although she's so busy with the politics of the New Republic, she doesn't have as much time to train. She is expecting twins, Jason and Jaina, and they are very powerful in the Force. She often sort of is speaking to them, and comforting them as she carries them. We see Han, of course. Lando is in this. I just think Zahn really gets all of these characters and does a great job getting inside of them and making them sound and act just as they do in the movies. Just exploring some more of the details and corners of this incredible world that Lucas created. The technological side and the sort of political side. We do see Mara Jade again. I feel like it's hard to talk about Mara Jade without spoiling her. And this is the second book, so if you don't want spoilers, this is your spoiler warning. Mara Jade, I knew, this is a major spoiler warning. I think I've read these books before. It's been a very long time. I have read other books in, other extended universe books by Thrawn, and so I knew Mara Jade ends up with Luke. But I'd forgotten the details of who she is. She was the Emperor's right-hand man. She was kind of his secret assassin assistant, and he sort of trained her in the powers of the Force, but he really didn't give her any independent powers of her own. So when the Emperor died, she kind of was lost. She had no contacts, and even her powers, because they kind of went through the Emperor, she lost those powers, but now she's starting to regain them. And oh my gosh, I just absolutely love the parts about Mara Jade. She is just such a brilliant addition. It is really interesting how Zahn imagines the sort of far-reaching consequences of the Emperor's power. Thrawn finds himself a dark Jedi to help him organize his attacks, and they speculate that the Emperor actually would have used his Force abilities to sort of enhance his fighters, within the military, to make them even more powerful and even more focused. We also have some bounty hunters and smugglers. In fact, I already gave a spoiler warning, but Dark Force Rising, you might have thought that was the dark side of the Force, but I'm starting to suspect it's actually going to be a fleet. So one of the technological ideas that I was about to say Thrawn, but I meant Zahn. Is that a coincidence? Those names are a little bit similar. One of the ideas he explores in this is the idea of ships that can fly by themselves, or that can be controlled by remote, because that could be handy, but then again, the ships are so valuable that if you lost them, that would be a problem. And they tell this story of back in the old Republic days, there was a whole fleet of dreadnought cruisers. I wonder if one of these ships, and I only see the Millennium Falcon and the TIE Fighters and the Imperial Star Cruiser. I don't see any dreadnought cruisers on here. But back in the days of the New Republic, there was this whole fleet of dreadnought cruisers that were wired with this, they call it slave ship circuitry. So they were, controlled by a smaller crew. And they all made a jump to light speed and were lost forever. This one smuggler, Card, who Mara Jade is working with, found the fleet of lost dreadnoughts, and so it looks like he's gonna go and pick them up because they've just been sitting dead in space for all these years. In the Star Wars movies, you often have multiple interesting plot lines going at the same time, and it's the same way in this book. You have Leia off on one adventure with Chewbacca, you have Lando and Han, Luke going to try to find the Dark Jedi. Of course, he doesn't know he's a Dark Jedi quite yet. Mara Jade with her powers waking up, and the smugglers finding the dreadnoughts. So it's really fun that you have so many characters and so much going on. So I'm maybe a third of the way through. Hopefully I will get through this before the end of February, and then of course I have one more in the trilogy to read. Just waiting for my adorable yellow kettle to boil. We were just talking on Discord about our teas and coffees in our cupboard. So here's my current coffee and tea situation. I really love this Teavana Peach Tranquility, but I also like this Downton Abbey English Rose blend. I do also have berries. I love berries, but I think I'm going to go with the Teavana since it's kind of late, so I'll skip the caffeine. Oh, don't. I'm catching up on some Run BTS, and I love how Jin and Suga are like yelling at baby Jungkook, and they're all learning to play tennis. I have taught 3 of my real life brothers to play tennis. I am kind of loving this episode. Jin, Suga, and Jungkook are kind of my dream team, my phone background. Well, that's Jungkook and Jin. This one is that adorable picture of the 3 of them. Jungkook's like, oh hey, we've been waiting for you. Suga's like, yeah, I got the directions. Jin is just there looking beautiful. This is just what I do when I play with my brothers. Mine. Get out of the way. Oh look, Suga had his Digitois hair, so this must have been like spring last year. Oh! Wow, V is... I was gonna say, when I first started, I found serving to be the hardest thing. I was so intimidated by serving for the longest time. I like that they're cleaning up all the tennis balls. Oh, look, they have... Oh, that's cheating. That's the way we do it. Oh my gosh, how cute is this? RM, you aren't slow. The world is just a little bit fast. Are we showing them the pick it up with your foot trick? Why hello there friends, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. I wanted to catch you guys up on my February reading. I've had kind of a busy month so far. I am actually in a new spot. I recently got a new place, so I've been busy moving and getting things organized. Obviously, books were an important part of the move. I do have space for more bookshelves now. I know I have some of the books on the floor here. I haven't actually purchased new bookshelves yet. I want to figure out exactly where the books should live and exactly what size shelves I want and where I'm gonna put them. It feels like a big decision, so I don't want to rush into it. See, now that I have more space, I'm gonna have to resist buying too many more books. I have, though, made some book purchases. Those I made before I even bought, like, you know, pots and pans for my kitchen. You guys already saw my PG Woodhouse books from Book Depository. Another book I bought from Book Depository was A New Mary Stuart, so I'm definitely gonna be picking this up soon. This is 9 Coaches Waiting. Becoming a governess at Chateau Vaumy in the French Alps marks a new beginning for Linda after her drab orphanage upbringing, but the elegant chateau is home to dark secrets, and when her young charge narrowly escapes a bullet, Linda must reassess her opinion of its manager and his handsome son. The settings are always so vivid and so beautifully done in Mary Stuart's novels, and of course the suspense is also brilliant. I've never read this one before, so I'm very excited. I was more than a little annoyed at Book Depository because the other Mary Stuarts that I've bought, there are like 2 editions of covers. The publisher for both is Hodder and Stoughton, so this must just be the older edition, and this is the newer one. When I first started ordering Mary Stuart's, I was actually hoping for this cover because I thought the girls on the cover looked so elegant. And the first books that I ordered, I have Thorny Hold, Rose Cottage, and Wildfire at Midnight. When I ordered at least one of these, the picture on the listing on Book Depository was this edition with the girl. So I was a little miffed when they came in the mail and like they're this other cover. It feels like you should get the cover that, you know, you saw on the listing when you ordered it. I think I did email Book Depository support and they said that the ISBN is the same, so they can't really do anything about it. That seemed a little crazy. Anyway, I had fully resigned myself to these sort of travel poster covers. They're beautiful. I love them. And this 9 Coaches Waiting, when I ordered it, it had this style of cover on the listing. So when it arrived and it was the girl, I was like, what am I supposed to do? I have a mixed collection. We'll have to see how much I like 9 Coaches Waiting. I did take a little bit of a risk because there was a Mary Stuart I ordered. Was it My Cousin Michael? I'll find the title and I'll put the cover on the screen here. But I really didn't like it. It was just way too dark and there were some like really dark and disturbing scenes in it. These are mysteries, there's murder involved, so of course they can be a little bit dark. But yeah, the last one that I read went a little bit over the top. 9 Coaches Waiting, it feels like, is one of the titles you hear when you hear Mary Stuart, so I'm hoping that I will have better luck with this one. As I was getting moved in and getting things unpacked, I actually put on the A&E, well, I guess it's technically BBC. There are 2 BBC editions of Pride and Prejudice. I tend to think of BBC as the one that came out in the 80s, and I think A&E, when I think of the version with Colin Firth and Jennifer L., that's the one I was rewatching, and it was such a delight. I've never done a ranking my Jane Austen film adaptations video, and I'm thinking I will have to do one of those. But I was also reading some Jane Austen this month. I reread Mansfield Park, which was so lovely. Fanny Price, I feel like she was one of Austen's favorite heroines. She calls her my Fanny towards the end. My favorite quote, or the quote that has kind of the most meaning and depth to me, is said by Fanny in Mansfield Park. It's when she's talking to Mr. Crawford and she says, "We have all a better guide in ourselves if we would attend to it than any other person could be," because Mr. Crawford is asking her to tell him what to do. And she's saying, look, listen to your conscience. You know what to do. You might not choose to do it. You might choose to ignore your conscience. That's the "if you would attend to it" bit of that quote, which is a very important hinge that the idea turns on. It's really hard to talk about Austen without spoiling it, so consider this a spoiler warning. I am planning to do a character map of Mansfield Park, so it's nice to have a refresher on this. Mr. Crawford, of course, does charm you. Every single time you reread this, you're like, if only Fanny could have ended up with him, if only he'd been different, if only he had attended to that better guide within himself, if only he'd been a little bit of a stronger character. Austen herself speculates at the end a sort of what if section, which you don't usually see. Probably because she knows most of her readers are thinking that way too. Whenever I get to the part of the novel where Mr. Crawford falls in love with Fanny, it's like there's the one chapter where she finally realizes how he feels and he proposes, and then she talks with her uncle and she talks with Edmund, and then there's another scene with Mr. Crawford, and I'm always tempted to like skip over the bit with the uncle and with Edmund to get to another Mr. Crawford scene. But the fact of the matter is, he was not reliable. Charming as he is, Fanny did end up with the better man. And Fanny ends up with who she wants to end up with. In some ways, I feel like Jane Austen, loves her heroine, loves Fanny, and so she gives Fanny what she wants. Fanny wanted Edmund, Fanny gets Edmund. But I do love that scene where Mr. Crawford is reading from Shakespeare. I think it's Henry VIII, I'd really like to read. I have never read Henry VIII. I'm thinking maybe I'll get a copy of that and start on that next, because I have been trying to read more Shakespeare this year. I'm going to see if I can manage a Shakespeare month, which we're already halfway through February, so I'm going to have to get my hands on Henry VIII and start it very soon. But last month I did finish Trellis and Cressida, so it would be great to keep on that Shakespeare spree. I've also never read Lover's Vows, which is the play that the characters attempt in Mansfield Park. One of the reasons I love Jane Austen so much is because her writing is so meticulously done. It's so full of meaning. I enjoy reading this. I often read it through very quickly, and then on a reread, I realize that there's this sentence I never stopped to admire before, or this little aside that is so brilliant that I just kind of passed over in the past. On this reread through, the description of Fanny and her brother stood out to me. I feel like maybe this is a description of Jane Austen and her own family, her own siblings. Fanny had never known so much felicity in her life as in this unchecked, equal, fearless intercourse with the brother and friend who was opening all his heart to her, telling her all his hopes and fears, plans and solicitudes, who was interested in all the comforts and all the little hardships of her home at Mansfield, ready to think of every member of that home as she directed, or differing only by a less scrupulous opinion and more noisy abuse of their Aunt Norris, and with whom, perhaps the dearest indulgence of the whole, all the evil and good of their earliest years could be gone over again, and every former united pain and pleasure retraced with the fondest recollection. An advantage this, a strengthener of love, in which even the conjugal tie is beneath the fraternal. Children of the same family, the same blood, with the same first associations and habits, have some means of enjoyment in their power which no subsequent connections can supply, and it must be by a long and unnatural estrangement, by a divorce which no subsequent connection can justify, if such previous remains of the earliest attachments are ever entirely outlived. Too often, alas, it is so. Fraternal love, sometimes almost everything, is at others worse than nothing. But with William and Fanny Price, it was still a sentiment in all its prime and freshness, wounded by no opposition of interest, cooled by no separate attachment, and feeling the influence of time and absence only in its increase. I just think that's so sweet, so bittersweet, because she acknowledges that sometimes that close tie of between siblings can become a source of pain, and too often there is estrangement. But I think Jane Austen was quite close with many of her siblings. She had, I believe, 5 or 6 brothers, and of course her one sister Cassandra. She and Cassandra were very close, and she was very close with many of her brothers too. Many of her brothers were in the Navy, so when you read Jane Austen's letters, when she's speaking of Frank or Charles and their ships and their commands and their hopes of promotion, it's very much reminiscent of Fanny talking about William. Most of the book takes place at Mansfield Park, but it is so interesting when Fanny finally gets to go home for a bit and revisits her immediate family at Portsmouth. When you're in Portsmouth and you get to know Fanny's mother a little bit more, you really kind of see the contrast between her and Fanny's 2 aunts. Fanny's mother, unfortunately, has more of the disposition of Aunt Bertram, so she's very laid back, she's not bustling and energetic. Her disposition was naturally easy and indolent, like Lady Bertram's, and a situation of similar affluence and do-nothingness would have been much more suited to her capacity than the exertions and self-denials of the one which her imprudent marriage had placed her in. She might have made just as good a woman of consequence as Lady Bertram, but Mrs. Norris would have been a more respectable mother of 9 children on a small income. At the very beginning of the book, we hear about the 3 Ward sisters and how Miss Maria Ward, with only £7,000, had the good luck to captivate Sir Thomas Bertram of Mansfield Park. The youngest sister, Fanny's mother, however, marries for love. She marries a naval officer who unfortunately has an injury, and so he's not fit for active service, who is not exactly a shining character, so Fanny's family has very little to live upon, and her mother does not manage it particularly well. I think it's so interesting the way Jane Austen's novels all involve very similar scenarios, but like they all kind of take you off in different directions and explore different possibilities. Like in Pride and Prejudice, Mrs. Bennet thinks that one of the daughters making a good marriage will ensure good marriages for the other daughters. And of course that's what the Ward sisters at the beginning of this think as well. But Aunt Norris ends up marrying the Reverend Mr. Norris, heiress, who she does meet through Sir Thomas Bertram, but she is not able to hook anyone more important or more wealthy. The youngest sister, Fanny's mother, of course marries for love, and everyone advises her against it, and it does not turn out too well. When you read about this marriage, you can understand a little bit more Lady Elliot in Persuasion, who advises Anne against marrying Captain Wentworth. Of course, Anne and Captain Wentworth were very different people from Fanny's mother and father, but just on the surface of things, seeing how that sort of naval marriage for love with no money on the one side worked out, you can understand Lady Elliot's concern. She didn't want Anne Elliot to be stuck in a situation like Miss Frances Ward, Fanny's mother. Anyway, rereading Jane Austen is always such a delight. I was breaking in, this is my Penguin English Classics hardcover. I don't think I had read this edition yet. The chain necklaces on the cover here are kind of perfect because that is definitely an element in the story. And there's one other favorite author who I've been revisiting. I have Leave It to Smith here by P.G. Wodehouse. I mentioned in my haul Wodehouse collection video that I'm doing a read along. So we're going to be doing a live stream book club of this, chatting about Leave It to Smith at the end of February. So the day after I post this video, I think it's the 27th, Saturday, at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and we've already been discussing it in my Discord group. It's been such a delight to revisit Wodehouse. There are just so many hilariously funny lines and funny scenes, just absolutely laugh out loud. And it's been such a delight to discuss it with you guys on Discord. Thank you so much to everyone who has joined. If you'd like to join, you can just shoot me an email, emma@bookishprincess.com, or a DM on Instagram, and I will send you the invite link. But yeah, it's just been so lovely to have a place to chat about books, about all sorts of things, hearing about what like tea and coffee you guys like, or people exchanging recipes or makeup tips. Someone posted a short poem that they had come across in the flyleaf of a old book, and it was written in such beautiful calligraphy. Just such a lovely, fun thing. Making YouTube videos can put you in a bit of a sort of paradoxical situation because on the one hand, I'm chatting with you guys, but on the other hand, I'm sitting here alone by myself. It can be a little bit lonesome as a creator. Sometimes it feels like you're putting all this out and like, you know, you put hours and hours into a video and you get so few comments, or the algorithm seems to be prejudiced against it and you just get no views. So the Discord community has been such a lovely antidote to that. It's just been so amazing to hear from you guys, just fun little things. Valentine's Day evening snack. I've got some adorable Valentine's Day M&Ms. This lovely Downton Abbey tea, caffeine-free blossoms and raspberries. See, I would not have thought I would like this because rose, let's see, I think isn't it rose flavored? Where does it say? That's a description of the movie. I want a description of the tea. There we go. Rose, raspberry, and hibiscus. I don't always like floral. Floral too often tastes like dish soap. But this really is nice, and like the fruitiness is nice, and look at that color. That's perfect for Valentine's Day. And now we are going to be doing a movie night with the Bookish Kingdom and the Bangtan Boys. Our movie of choice is Sound of Music. Look at this, that's the perfect gif. We're already... I'm sure this will be giving me some flashbacks to our trip to Salzburg, our trip to Austria, and oh, this is such a cute intro screen. But yes, we visited a bunch of the Sound of Music sites in Salzburg a year or two ago when we went to Switzerland and Austria and Germany over the summer. This is such a great movie. So I've made a start on Mary Stuart's 9 Coaches Waiting. I am about 3 coaches in. She divides up, instead of chapters, it's by coach, which I'm guessing is going to correspond to journeys that the heroine takes. The heroine was an orphan. Her parents were actually, well, I guess they were mostly British, but also partly French. So she grew up in France for the first 9 years of her life. But then she was sent back to England when her parents died. And so she grew up in an orphanage there, but she desperately wanted to get back to France. So she's finally had this opportunity, quite an opportunity. She becomes the governess at this gorgeous chateau, which is not far from Geneva. That was fun to hear her flying into Geneva. It's just out in this spectacular countryside, but there's like a little bit of a Simba Mufasa thing going because the little boy who she is in charge of, his name is Philippe, and he one day will inherit this chateau, but his father and mother have died. He's also an orphan, and so right now the chateau is run by his uncle, and it's really fascinating. In the first chapter, the heroine remembers something her father said about the uncle, Leon de Valmy, about how the uncle was not a good guy. So she has this just sort of sense of unease from the beginning that she's constantly trying to talk herself out of. Of course, there's always suspense in Mary Stuart. Mary Stuart is just kind of the master of building tension. So far, it's been a really beautiful trip to France, following the heroine around the little village, around the grounds of the chateau, and seeing what exactly is going to unfold with this family. I must confess that tea without a little piece of chocolate to go with it is just not the same. Every Lent I always give up chocolate, and every Lent I realize anew how much joy just a small piece of chocolate brings. I have been rereading the Gospels this Lent. This is my Bible. It is the Revised Standard Version, Second Catholic Edition. At Mass every week you always hear a reading from the Old Testament, a reading from the New Testament, but it's definitely different to just sit down and read the whole thing in order. You notice different things. Another book, oh, that's my toast. I'll get it in a minute. Another book I have here that I thought would be good to read for Lent is A Biblical World. The Biblical World, an Illustrated Atlas. This is by National Geographic, by Jean-Pierre Is Boots, forward by Bruce Chilton. My dad was reading this, and I just thought it sounded really interesting, and so I asked if I could borrow it. It is really fascinating to kind of be able to map out all of the action of the Bible, because of course you're familiar with all of these various city names and place names, but you're just hearing them or reading them on the page. You're not looking at them on a map or hearing about what archaeological treasures they've dug up in that region. And my dad is really interested in ancient history and knows a lot and loves to watch lectures on YouTube, and he was watching this one from the Oriental Institute in Chicago. I looked up the title of it because it was so good. It was by Irving Finkel, who is a curator at the British Museum, and it was called The Ark Before Noah, A Great Adventure. And usually when my dad puts on a lecture from the Oriental Institute, it doesn't really grab you, like you maybe pass on through the room. But this one was so good. I came in like maybe 4 minutes in, and it was so good, it was like, no wait, can we skip to the beginning? I want to watch the whole thing. This lecture was just so funny, had so much personality, was just hilarious. He came across this ancient cuneiform tablet, and I love how casually he talks about translating it on site. But basically it had a version of Noah's flood story, and it was basically like God telling Noah the dimensions with which to build the ark. Like, it was very technical and very specific, and it's actually a giant coracle. I had heard the word coracle in, I'm pretty sure Jim Hawkins steals a coracle in Treasure Island. But anyway, this curator, partnered with a mathematician to see if these dimensions were right, like would they work, how big of a boat are we talking, what would it look like, and he ended up partnering with a film crew and creating a documentary where they actually rebuilt the Noah's Ark. And just the way he describes it, is so funny, so engaging. I would highly recommend that lecture. And now I need to go look up that documentary because that should be really fun to watch. Another Lenten read I've been thinking about picking up is inspired by Christy Lewis. Dostoevsky in Space is her booktube channel, and she's been talking about reading Spurgeon, and I was only familiar with that name because, what's her name? Because Jessa Duggar named her son Spurgeon. He's such a cute little boy. I love the Duggars. 19 Kids and Counting on that show on TLC. Anyway, I knew they named their son after this preacher, but I didn't know anything about him. Just hearing Christy quote from his sermons, they sound like they have a lot of spunk and a lot of character, so I kind of want to check those out. Probably I'll save that till March, and this I'm sure I will be reading all throughout Lent. Also, I almost forgot to mention, I did grab the free Kindle version of King Henry VIII, which was mentioned in Mansfield Park. The first act opens with my lord, the Duke of Buckingham, and I read The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas last year, and he features largely in that. I think it's the same Duke of Buckingham. I'm gonna have to look that up actually. The Three Musketeers is so much about the French court and the French political machinations, and the Duke of Buckingham is the main British kind of power player, but you don't even really hear who the King of England is at that time. I'm really interested to see if when I come across the passage that Henry Crawford would have read in Mansfield Park, if I'll recognize it, or if it's even known. Like, is it obvious which speech it is that he read? I like the prologue. I come no more to make you laugh, things now that bear a weighty and a serious brow, sad, high, and working, full of state and woe, such noble scenes as draw the eye to flow, we now present. Those that can pity here may, if they think it well, let fall a tear, the subject will deserve it. Shakespeare, of course, was writing for Elizabeth, and her father was King Henry VIII, so I'm sure he had to be a lot more careful with this kind of subject matter than ancient Greece or Verona or, you know, some foreign clime where he set his play. But if the play is set in England and it's the monarch's father you're talking about, you're presumably going to have to be a little bit more politically correct. I don't have a blender, so I'm having the chunky version of carrot ginger soup, but it's been delicious. I added a dollop of sour cream, and I think I might add another because the sour cream makes it so tasty and creamy and just gives a nice kind of contrast of a cool bite with the warm soup. Well, we finally have a sunny day today. It looks like the snow has taken a break. Maybe the snow is gone. Fingers crossed. Spring and the green will be returning soon. I did finish up Dark Forest Rising. I thought the first sort of half of this was a little bit slow going, but then the last maybe third really picked up and just couldn't put it down. I already gave a spoiler warning, but here's another spoiler warning if you don't want this storyline spoiled. I absolutely loved it when Mara Jade had to go to Luke and ask for help, and when they teamed up, it was so great. It was really interesting to see in this installment in the story how the characters were once again always crossing paths, but this time it felt like Thrawn, like in the first book, he would make these kind of guesses and he would be right about what was happening, but in the second book, he would make certain guesses and he would be wrong. So I kind of liked that, switching it up, the race to the finish, as it were, to find this ghost fleet. this sort of lost treasure fleet, the Katana fleet, was really exciting, and the final battle was also really exciting, and like the different new surprises that came to light that I'm sure will be explored more in the third book in the trilogy. So yes, definitely looking forward to, in March, hopefully finishing up the Thrawn trilogy. No, this is not a filter. I just thought the kind of sun glare spots here were really pretty and very appropriate for Star Wars, right? They've just been zooming all around the galaxy. March has not quite yet arrived, but I'm wondering if I should let myself start one of the books that I was planning to read next month a little early. I have Farmer Boy and Smoky House here. I did post a video about my sort of middle grade March reading plans. Middle grade March is a readathon where you're encouraged to read, you know, young adult literature, middle school grade children literature throughout the month of March. I'm so excited for the read along I'll be doing with Kate Howe and Christy from Dostoevsky in Space. A whole bunch of other booktubers are co-hosting a read-along of Miracles on Maple Hill. If you haven't caught it, you can check out my video announcement to get more details on that. We'll be doing a Zoom discussion for that at the end of March. So if you want to be a part of that and you haven't yet, you can send me an email or email any of the hosts of the read-along. But yes, I have lots of fun reads to anticipate next month, although I probably shouldn't let myself look at them yet. I do have a couple chapters left of Leave It to Smith to finish. I'm probably gonna finish Mary Stuart just in March. I'm not gonna try to push myself to finish that by the end of February, but Henry VIII, I would really love to finish that so that I can keep on my streak. So this is my bookshelf setup at the moment. I just have the one bookshelf, which is pretty packed. I was initially thinking maybe I would just buy some more bookshelves that height and I could have them like taking up this entire wall, but that is kind of pretty paneling, so I could instead put my bookshelves against this wall where it wouldn't be covering up any paneling, and then I could do, you know, tall bookshelves. I could do half height bookshelves. I probably will keep my desk somewhere against that wall. So yes, I have lots of options that I've been debating, and yes, this is the one and only Felicity Merriman. I was just mentioning Felicity's fashion in my Pocket Camp video. See, this is Felicity's Christmas dress that the Pocket Camp people, I feel like, totally were inspired by. Now they just need to do her spring dress, which is so pretty, all pink with the lovely apron. And here she's got some roses for us. See, now I just need to get a Windsor writing chair like that, a real one, to match Felicity's. Here I've got a cup of tea and Leave It to Smith. I have finished this. I guess I'll keep most of my Leave It to Smith thoughts for the live stream on Saturday, but if you watched my January reading vlog, then you will have heard me talk about Mike and Smith, which is when the character Smith is at school. So he's kind of like a senior in high school, and it has all their hilarious pranks and his wonderful personality. But in Leave It to Smith, we find Smith in somewhat impecunious circumstances. He's been working for his uncle in the fish business, but the fish business does not suit him. So he's decided to strike out on his own. The advertisement that he puts in the paper is pretty fantastic. Hold on, where is it? It was a well-displayed advertisement and one that had caught the eye of many other readers of the paper that morning. It was worded to attract attention, and it had achieved its object. But where others who read it had merely smiled and marveled idly how anybody could spend good money putting nonsense like that in the paper, to Freddie, its import was wholly serious because, see, luckily, someone does take Smith up on his offer. Leave it to Smith. Smith will help you. Smith is ready for anything. Do you want someone to manage your affairs? Someone to handle your business? Someone to take the dog for a run? Someone to assassinate your aunt? Smith will do it. Crime not objected to. Whatever job you have to offer, provided it has nothing to do with fish. Leave it to Smith. So there you can see where the title came from. Freddie does not want Smith to assassinate an aunt, but he does need his help stealing a diamond necklace from his aunt. Mike from Mike and Smith actually makes a cameo, and actually he is kind of there behind the scenes because Mike has married Phyllis, and Phyllis's father is Mr. Keeble, who lives at Blandings Castle, and it's Mr. Keeble who needs to steal his wife's diamond necklace in order to give Phyllis and her husband Mike, Smith's best friend, enough money to establish themselves in business. If it sounds convoluted, that's because it is, but Woodhouse makes it. But Woodhouse makes all the twists and turns so hilarious and delightful. Mike's wife, Phyllis, her best friend is named Eve Halliday, and Eve is the heroine of the book. She has quite a hat. It's honestly, I want a hat and outfit. Like Eve's, pleased and gratified as Smith was to have something nice to look at out of the smoking room window, he was also somewhat puzzled. This girl seemed to him to radiate an atmosphere of wealth. Starting at the farthest south and proceeding northward, she began in a gleam of patent leather shoes. Fawn stockings, obviously expensive, led up to a black crepe frock, and then, just as the eye was beginning to feel that there could be nothing more, it was stunned by a supreme hat of a soft, dull satin with a black bird of paradise feather falling down over the left shoulder, even to the masculine eye, which is notoriously to seek in these matters, a whale of a hat. Woodhouse's use of vocabulary is so fantastic because you have this great sort of Shakespearean language because Smith loved to read Shakespeare, and then a whale of a hat. This sumptuously upholstered young woman had been marooned by a shower of rain beneath the awning of Messrs. Thorpe and Briscoe. Why, Smith asked himself, for this? Even, he argued, if Charles the chauffeur had been given the day off or was driving her father the millionaire to the city to attend to his vast interests, she could surely attend a cab fare. Smith himself is very nattily turned out, but impecunious. Eve also was tempted by this stunning hat in the window and then had to go out and buy an entire outfit to live up to it, and so now she also is seeking employment and has some pretty empty pockets. I'll just read one more quote. I'm sure I'll be reading out plenty of quotes in the live stream, but this is one of the ways in which Smith proposes to Eve. By the way, returning to the subject we were discussing last night, I forgot to mention when asking you to marry me that I can do card tricks. Really? And also a passable imitation of a cat calling to her young. Has this no weight with you? Think! These things come in very handy in the long winter evenings. But I shan't be there when you are imitating cats in the long winter evenings. I think you are wrong. As I visualize my little home, I can see you there very clearly, sitting before the fire. Your maid has put you into something loose. The light of the flickering flames reflects itself in your lovely eyes. You are pleasantly tired after an afternoon's shopping, but not so tired as to be unable to select a card, any card, from the pack which I offer. I just absolutely adore Smith. It's been so much fun to revisit this and to chat with you guys about it in Discord, so I'm super looking forward to our live stream.